China. You live in Australia. How do I know? Crane is a fucking incredibly old HasanAbi chatter that has consistently been in this community for fucking 5 years at this point. I won't even get into why Crane would probably be very anti-Maoist. Specific reasons as to why. However, that's how you know this is like very ridiculous framing. Here, we'll do the rise of Xi Jinping.
These are the 7 most powerful men in China.
I'm going to pepper in more variety into the Palestine coverage.
China. They represent the top leadership positions of the ruling party, and their identities are revealed every 5 years at a carefully choreographed political event called the National Congress.
China's Communist Party unveils its new leadership over the next 5 years.
The order of appearance is symbolic. The first person to emerge is the head of the party for the next 5 years. At the most recent event in October 2022, that person was Xi Jinping, China's president for the last 10 years, who walked out in the top spot a historic 3rd time after getting rid of China's presidential term limit that restricted all his predecessors to 2 terms, a signal that he may be planning to stay in power for life. The world hasn't seen a Chinese leader like this since Mao Zedong, the revolutionary founder of the People's Republic of China, whose ruthless dictatorship scarred the Chinese people for generations. Xi has been compared to Mao a lot, and he clearly draws from Mao's playbook. But there's something else that connects these two. When Xi was
famously, they hate him. That's why, like, for example, we hate our founders, and that's why we have them on all of our money. You know what I mean? Like, if you ask the broad majority of Americans, like, what they feel about how they feel about the founding fathers, like, they'll be like, oh man, I hate them. I hate those guys. You know? Fucking hate those guys.
just a young boy, Mao ruined his life. Generations apart, their paths crossed unexpectedly, and a teenage Xi from an elite family in Beijing ended up in exile, condemned to hard labor in the countryside. 50 years later, Xi is one of the most powerful political figures in the world and the only leader since Mao to have unchecked.
I'm just saying, kind of seems like he got his money up. And not his funny up. What are your opinions on the founding fathers? I'm talked about it. They're racist, rapists, slavers for the most part. However, resisting the British Empire, very cool. You know? Some good, some bad.
Checked power over China. So how did he go from being banished in his country to taking complete control of it? Xi Jinping's connection to Mao formed long.
Is it a tanky? Yeah, sure. Yeah, guys, seems like Xi going to the labor camp greatly benefited him. I'm just saying, it seems like the labor camp worked for him. Look at him, dude. He got his money up. Don't do it. Don't do it to him. I'm just saying.
Long before Xi was even born. It goes back to when a bloody civil war was raging in China. A group of radical communist revolutionaries, including Mao, gained influence over large swaths of mainland China and controlled a communist military called the Red Army that fought the Nationalist Party ruling the Republic of China at the time. At this point, the communists were losing.
Yeah, just like ruling. Just some guys. Just some guys who were ruling. Like, Maoist labor camps, but also the fucking Nationalist Party is just some national. There's small bean. They're just the boys, you know, just some dudes.
Bad. The bulk of their army was pinned down here.
Like, it's important. It's important to identify the way that you massage a narrative, okay? Like, you don't have to agree with everything that Mao did. But if you are talking about everything everything that communist China did is like really bad or really scary, while simultaneously talking about like the nationalist governance is simply just the nationalist government, like nothing there. You know, it seems like you're skipping out on important context.
Here, in a communist-controlled region originally established by Mao, now surrounded by nationalist forces. And they were running low on food. So the Red Army decided to launch a bold attack to break through the nationalist forces and evacuate the roughly 130,000 communist soldiers and civilians stuck here. 16th, 1934, they made their move and attacked a weaker part of the enemy line. They broke through, and even though their numbers quickly dropped, with thousands dying and thousands more fleeing to the countryside, around 86,000 stuck together and pushed on. This was the beginning of a year-long historic retreat called the Long March, the journey to establish a new communist base far from the nationalist forces. Mao, who used to be a military leader, wasn't in charge at this time. He'd insisted on using guerrilla tactics, which had heavily influenced the Red Army earlier in the war, but that approach had fallen out of favor and he was demoted. The Long March changed that. After escaping the siege here, the Red Army continued to suffer relentless attacks by the pursuing nationalist army. The military leaders of the march had pushed for a more traditional wartime strategy of direct confrontation.
When you hear stuff like this, it is important. It is certainly important to understand, nationalism. Well, I feel like that's not a good thing. What's up with that? They just kind of are glancing over like what the rule looked like by simply saying like, oh, they're just the nationalist ruling government, the ruling party at the time. Just saying. Something to consider.
Confrontation rather than Mao's guerrilla tactics. And the result was catastrophic for the Red Army. Less than half of the original escape group survived the first 3 months alone. So it was at this first stopping point where Communist Party leader Zhou Enlai handed military leadership back to Mao. And Mao picked an endpoint for the march. Here, 800 miles away in rural northern China. But they didn't go straight for it. Mao led the Red Army deep into the mountains where he predicted lighter resistance. And he was right. But the journey was still brutal. It was 9 more months of non-stop marching and fighting along this several thousand-mile route before they ultimately arrived in northern China, where a guerrilla base led by a communist revolutionary named Xi Jinping offered Mao's army refuge, bringing the Long March to an end. That man was Xi Jinping's father. In the end, fewer than 8,000 of the original marchers survived. Even though thousands died on the Long March from starvation, fighting, and disease, Mao's leadership was credited with saving the Red Army from total annihilation, and he became the de facto head of the party as well as the military, entrusted with rebuilding the army to take on the nationalist forces for total control of China.
Wherever and however the Red troops move into battle, they spread the glory of Mao Zedong.
This is a good stopping point in the story to talk about how power in the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, works. Officially, the highest level of authority is a group called the Central Committee and is responsible for all of the party's major policy decisions. Within the Central Committee is a select group of officials called the Political Bureau, or Politburo. In most communist parties, like that of the former Soviet Union, the Politburo represents the most powerful members of the party besides the General Secretary. But the Chinese Communist Party has a key distinction that makes it unique. It has one more, even smaller selection of top officials who ultimately have the final say, an elite class of Politburo members called the Politburo Standing Committee. This group, which includes the General Secretary, holds supreme control over the Central Committee, dictates the will of the party, and is in full control of the Central Military Commission, which oversees China's defense. Mao's promotion during the Long March landed him here, in the highest position of the military and the Politburo Standing Committee. Even though he was considered the de facto head of the party when the Long March ended in 1935, he officially became head of the party in 1943. With both the party and the military under his control, Mao began to exploit the system to ensure he remained at the top for the rest of his life. At Mao's first National Congress as the official party leader in 1945, the party introduced a resolution that brought his influence to a whole new level.
Yeah. Any Western leader that continues its reign and has like broad popularity is seen as good. Any Eastern leader, especially no matter how war torn their country is at the time, is bad. Like FDR is good. Mao is across the board bad. No shot Hasan going to compare this to FDR. On principle alone, it doesn't matter. It is impossible to contextualize. It's impossible to contextualize what Chinese governance looks like at this time. They have literally withstood genocides. They've forcibly taken the country back from psychotic fascist governance. They've pushed the fascists into Taiwan. Now that fascist government is considering themselves to be the real China that one day will come back and take over the entirety of the China. European allies that helped facilitate and destroy the Japanese army in the region are also operating under the recognition that the Taiwanese exiles are actually the real Chinese leadership. Western leaders can't be reelected more than once. Yes, they can. What are you talking about? What the fuck? And this is, by the way, the absolute worst of the worst of Chinese history at this point. Or I mean, at least like compared to now. Like this comparison has to be made when while also simultaneously looking at the material conditions on the ground. I love the idea that like Western leaders can only be elected once. No, that's not true. You can serve multiple terms. It just depends on which country you're talking about. But also, in many circumstances, people don't simply get elected, especially when they're in war or especially when they are going through an ethnic cleansing campaign, for example. Chatter was right about what? That at the top of the hour, I would forget to run a 3-minute ad break, or that I also run my ship with a Politburo. Yeah, Zelensky, great example. Comedian Zelensky is potentially considering, because the country is under martial law at the moment, because they're invaded, potentially considering not having another election in the upcoming year. Just saying. Anyway, if you want the unfettered access, they mention the Long March, but never talk about World War II or any details of the Civil War. Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, it's just massaging the narrative. They briefly glance over KMT as though like it's just simply a nationalist party. Don't talk about World War II and the collaborative efforts. Don't talk about the fucking death and destruction that and the genocide that the Chinese population withstood at the time, with the limited fucking allegiance that they even had at the time with the Red Army, unironically, the American government. While also simultaneously hitting the both sides angle. For the fact that the KMT, the Nationalists, were very close allies of the Nazi Party. This was right after a massive revolution almost completely wiped out the federal structure. It's nothing modern Westerners can comprehend. Exactly. You could, like, you're talking about a fucking war-torn population that was literally fucking genocided by a regional colonial power at the time. that also simultaneously was engaging in war with a nationalist authoritarian dictatorship that was also fucking brutal. While they're like literally rice farmers and have nothing. You know what I mean? None of the benefits of being a developed, industrialized nation. It's unimaginable. Unimaginable. Which is why I think a lot of Americans or a lot of Westerners, especially capitalist Westerners, are allergic to any kind of historical materialism, because historical materialism shows the insane gains made by socialist leadership or communist leadership. Like unimaginable efforts in collectivization. Now, obviously, there was a tremendous fuck ton of losses as well, okay? Obviously. Like Cultural Revolution or the USSR's famines. Like there's so much. There's so much that happened that was devastating to the population. And that should be recognized, in my opinion, of course. The idea that it was all great and all fun is silly. Just like it's silly to personally look at the situation and go, well, the KMT is just like some guys.
It unified the party around a single understanding of its history and declared Mao's political ideology, later called Mao Zedong thought, or Maoism, as the unquestioned guiding principle of the Chinese Communist Party. Basically, Mao's ideas or policy decisions could no longer be challenged by anyone. It was here he unveiled his equivalent at the time of the Politburo Standing Committee, the 4 other top party leaders, all long marchers deeply loyal to Mao, like Liu Shaoqi and Zhou Enlai, who'd go on to hold some of the most powerful positions in the future government.
This is also funny because it's like, why doesn't he do the Obama style? What was it when he had all the Goldman Sachs guys? What did they call it? I love when in the Western world we fucking constantly complain about how cucked the Democratic Party is, the reactionary opposition. Okay. Constantly fucking Nancy Pelosi literally crying about like, we want a strong Republican Party. It's the basis of a healthy democracy. And then Obama did a team of rivals. Like, that's great. We had all the Goldman guys in the fucking office. And then when you have a fucking cabinet full of loyalists, you're like, what, that's really fucked up. Yeah, no shit, man. Dude's trying to save people. Yeah, I'm sorry that, he wasn't... I'm sorry that he didn't do Obama-style team of rivals, okay? Brilliant. Why didn't he have the fucking fascists come into power? I like how we framed the only qualifications as loyal to Mao rather than prove their capabilities over 20 years of war. Listen, when you got a motherfucking Australian criticizing an anti-Chinese video, okay? That's when you know you've gone too fucking far on your historical revisionism. You understand? I know you're Chinese too, but you're more Australian than you're Chinese. Come on now. I know you're Chinese. Bitch, you don't live in China, you live in Australia. How do I know? Korean is a fucking incredibly old HasanAbi chatter that has consistently been in this community for fucking 5 years at this point. I won't even get into why Korean would probably be very anti-Maoist. Specific reasons as to why. However, that's how you know this is like very ridiculous framing. Anyway.
4 years later, Mao declared final victory for the communists in the decades-long Chinese Civil War and established a new country, the People's Republic of China, or PRC.
Mao Zedong, once a lowly party worker, now assumed the stature of the dominant figure in all of Eastern Asia.
But winning a revolution isn't the same as running a country.
Because now that you're running a country, there's all these other things you have to do, like deliver the mail and like build a dam and stuff like that. You can't possibly have the party do all these things
So the party set up a government that would take the policy decisions made by the Politburo Standing Committee and figure out a way to make them a reality.
And so it evolved to a system where the party would make all the important decisions, and especially the Politburo Standing Committee. Then, as it is today, many of these decisions would go to the State Council. So the State Council is the highest decision-making body on the state side, led by the Premier of China.
The Premier of China, by the way, is almost always a member of the Politburo Standing Committee. One way Mao kept a tight grip on power over the years was by promoting those loyal to him to top positions in the party and government, whether they had government experience or not.
What is this take? What is this take? What fucking government doesn't do that? Bro, one of the funniest fucking parts about covering China from the American framework is that they literally point to things that everyone does, and it's perfectly reasonable to do, and goes, dude, could you imagine that they did that? I always go back to the one article I read on the New York Times like a couple years prior, where they talked about how there is a blossoming economy in Beijing, specifically surrounding a revisionist history, okay? A revisionist history of China. What they were describing was museums. But the way that they were describing a museum, which literally is the exact same revisionist nonsense that you get in American museums, by the way, was this like unimaginable brainwashing operation. The funniest thing that the American government does, oh, here it is, the centennial, China centennial red tourism flourishes. Red tourism flourishes in China ahead of Party Centennial. New and improved attractions dedicated to the Communist Party's history, or a sanitized version of it, are drawing crowds. What do you mean? Do you mean they have museums? Like, yeah, no, you're right. It is fucked up that they're doing revisionist history, right? Except it's the very same motherfuckers that yell at me when I talk about America doing that. Additionally fucked up, literally looking at this article right now, so close to a concept called Thanksgiving. You know, dedicated to the collaborative effort amongst the pilgrims and the indigenous society that lived here before the pilgrims got here, you know? What happened to them, I wonder? Who knows? Thank God we have Thanksgiving to celebrate the matter.
For example, Zhou Enlai, the former party leader who helped Mao rise to power during the Long March, became China's first premier.
That's crazy.
The advantage of that is that they could never challenge him. The disadvantage of that is they didn't know what they were doing, and so administration suffered, policy outcomes suffered.
Long March survivors often became party elites under Mao. Xi Jinping's father, for example, was appointed Secretary General of the State Council. And as the son of a Long Marcher, young Xi was given the informal...
Dude, listen. Nepo babies that fucking bring their dad up to the top, that's my shit.
...title of princeling. Mao succeeded in never giving up his power during his lifetime. His unchecked policies resulted in massive famines and widespread persecution that cost between 40 and 80 million lives over a span of decades, and culminated in the disastrous Cultural Revolution, a violent final attempt from Mao to consolidate his power and force loyalty to the practice of Maoism. The idea was to make himself and his ideas eternal. The way
I mean, I think there's fairness there. Obviously, death numbers attributed to famine under mismanagement in an agrarian society is directly the fault of communism. And then we have literal fucking abundance. Okay? Literal fucking abundance. And yet people still die of famine, 14 million a year under a global capitalist structure. But of course, those guys, well, you know, fuck you, baby. Oh, are you a baby in a fucking mine in the Democratic Republic of Congo? Are you a Congolese baby? Guess what? L. Did you die of famine? L. It's literally 4 million, bro, not 40. What are you talking about? No, I said 14 million. 14 million yearly, globally, dying to famine and famine-related diseases. Every year, annually. Listen, bro, sorry. Sorry, are you a fucking Yemenite baby? Are you a baby in Yemen, dude? Oh yeah, that was a blockade that the American forces instilled upon you with American weapons. Thank you, Saudi Arabia. Guess what? L shouldn't have been born in Yemen. R.I.P. Bozo. Because that's not capitalism. That's not imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. That is an L. You're taking an L. Oh, you meant the Great Leap Forward numbers. Oh, okay. I'm just saying, dude. L after L. Under communist planning. Under communist planning. Okay? You fuck it up. People die. That's your fault. That's the fault of communism. Okay? Under capitalism, we have the abundance. We have the supplies. We have the technology. Like, capitalist planning has created a structure where literally everyone could eat. But the reasons as to why everyone can't eat, despite the fact that we have an abundance, is because logistics. Is because it doesn't go along with the profit motive. Like, it will be unprofitable to fucking give food away for free. It's nuts. Mao embodied the bootstraps crowd's vision, but they aren't ready for that. Thank you.
He viewed communist figureheads like Lenin and Marx before him. Anyone that didn't fall in line with Mao's ideology was publicly humiliated, impoverished, excluded from society, and in many cases, executed. Either at the hands of the army or by a militant youth group obsessed with enforcing Maoism, the Red Guards.
This video is a hit piece? Yeah, no shit.
Even those closest to the dictator weren't safe from his purges during the Cultural Revolution. High-level officials, including members of the Politburo Standing Committee and Long Marchers, were removed from their positions. Liu Shaoqi was denounced as a traitor and died while imprisoned under harsh conditions. Mao also removed the chief of staff of the army and replaced him with a Maoist, leaving no one left to oppose him in the military. Mao's handpicked successor, who always appeared loyally by his side in photos and propaganda posters, died under mysterious circumstances when his plane crashed as he was fleeing to the Soviet Union. Mao later denounced him as a traitor. He denounced Xi's father, too. This is a photo of Xi Sr. being restrained and publicly criticized by the Red Guards at the height of the Cultural Revolution. He would remain a prisoner in Beijing for 8 years following this. With his father purged, Xi Jinping, 15 at the time, was expelled from his elite school in Beijing and sent to work in the countryside.
He had to live in a cave and, do hard manual labor. His food was barely enough for, a growing young person. And Chairman Mao was responsible for all of it.
This is what the subreddit thinks of you when you buy stock accounts? Yeah.
But then, Mao died. The Cultural Revolution ended. His successor was Deng Xiaoping, one of the Politburo Standing Committee members who was removed from power during the Cultural Revolution, who, just before Mao died, started making a promise to fellow exiled party veterans.
Deng Xiaoping signaled credibly to all the surviving Long Marchers that he wanted to rehabilitate people. So when Mao died, they all supported the rehabilitation of Deng. And as soon as Deng was rehabilitated, he went ahead and rehabilitated all these people.
With experienced leadership back in place, the party needed to figure out how to...
Oh, now they're experienced. Oh, wait, where was the experience prior, I wonder? Yeah, they were too busy marching, dog. That's why they were the fucking leadership. But now they're experienced. Liberals are back in charge. Listen. You don't have to be a dangus to recognize that this man understood capitalism perfectly. Okay? He did. He did. There's no... I mean, look at modern China. Look at modern China. What the fuck? What is my... Oh, shit. My stupid fucking plate was pressing the page down button aggressively. My stupid plate.
To prevent something like this from ever happening again. In order to undo Mao's cult of personality, the party introduced a second historical resolution in 1981. It condemned periods of Mao's rule and emphasized a renewed commitment to collective leadership, vowing to oppose the consolidation of power around one person moving forward.
The successors to Mao didn't want a dictatorship, so they divided up these positions and put them in the hands of different people.
Like Mao, Deng kept tight control over the Central Military Commission as its chairman, and held a leadership position in the government, but was never head of state. He never held the highest position in the party either. Instead, he set up a new advisory commission and served as its chairman, which allowed him to influence the party's direction without positioning himself directly on top of it. This allowed a power-sharing structure while still making Deng the de facto leader of China until he stepped down in 1989, following the army's massacre of students protesting in Tiananmen Square.
A protester suddenly ran into the middle of the street and in front of the oncoming tanks.
Anger at Deng Xiaoping, the entire Chinese government, it had the real feeling of rebellion in the streets of Beijing.
People want to fight the military out of their city.
Fucking youngins, dude. Always causing a ruckus, you know what I'm saying?
Deng and his ideology, which moved away from Maoism, set a precedent of sharing power. He opened up China and established economic ties with these countries, and was the first PRC leader to visit the US in 1979.
Today we take another step in the historic normalization of relations which we have begun this year.
Deng's reforms became the foundation for decades of economic prosperity that led China to having the world's second largest economy over time and being on the verge of becoming the world's next superpower.
Communism is creating a consumer society.
It also reminds you that the standard of living in China is going up.
Here, capitalism rules.
One thing...
Dude, Deng is working with VOX? What do you mean, dude? Fucking every billionaire is technically a Dengist. Like Michael Bloomberg. Remember when he was like fucking hyping up China so aggressively? Why wouldn't you be? Think about the fucking profit margins, dude. Think about it. Why wouldn't you fucking love an entire massive nation that quite literally was like, we will be your manufacturing hub? Okay? We'll do it. We'll do it for you. It's not the free market principles that made China what it is. It's what they did with that foreign capital that made China what it is. There's plenty of fucking other countries that were like, we will do your industrial output. Like we'll be the manufacturing hub for you. Where are they? This is the thing that most people don't understand. Now imagine doing all that shit without while not having like a 400-year lapse of not even being a part of the fucking industrial revolution. Think about that. Imagine being able to do that on the backs of 400 years of colonial violence and slavery. The amount of prosperity that the Western nations got as a consequence of all of that is unimaginable. And we squandered it. We squandered it. We cast it aside. We said, fuck this shit. That's why I always say, what is all this fucking blood and soil and all of this violence if all that it gives you in America is like being able to go to fucking Walmart and eat 30 different brands of Oreos and that's it? Like, what are we doing? What are we doing? We live in the imperial core. We live in the fucking United States of America, the richest nation on the planet, richest nation throughout history, and motherfuckers don't have health care, dog. That's crazy to me. That is an abject failure. There is no better way to show that capitalism is inherently always in a decaying position than looking at America like it's literally the fail son of nations. It's like being the fucking billionaire Koch brothers' like shitty ass nephew that squanders all of that wealth and prosperity. Meanwhile, all we're doing is dunking on motherfuckers who are broke boys from the jump. Wow, dude, look at China, 1945, fucking just straight up. 1945 to now in China. Think about the amount of development that occurred in that process with genuine setbacks. Okay? Genuine setbacks, millions fucking dead, famine. And then you look at China now, and it's fucking insane. 1948, 1945, whatever the fuck, okay? Think about what the conditions are post-World War II in China. They've just withstood genocide. They don't got the Marshall Plan. They don't got none of that shit. There's no Western colonial backing at that point. Western colonial backing, colonial power backing is literally going to the nationalist the psychopaths that are doing the white terror, and the rest of the world is recognizing them as the fucking true Chinese government. Man, look at this. Look at where they're at after that. Look at that. In that same time frame, what did America do with all that wealth? We haven't developed shit. Resting on the laurels of the New Deal, dude. That's insane to me. We lucked out like 1,000 times because of how far away we were from the action during World War II. And then we became the major power. But what did we do? All we did was build more fucking lanes and highways. Exactly. No high-speed rail, no nothing.
Did lead to was a lot of policy innovation and then some degree of decentralization. And both of these things helped China's economy enormously.
Which is why this period of economic growth and reform, stretching over roughly 30 years, is known as the Deng era. And whether he wanted to or not, Deng kept his word and never tried to consolidate absolute power around himself.
He did end up sharing power, and that set the stage for power sharing in the party until the rise of...
Yeah, bro, that's why he fucking China did so well, because he shared power.
Xi Jinping.
So what was Xi doing all this time? When Mao...
Am I crazy? Look, I'm not a big city lawyer. I'm not the most fucking well-read on this. But wasn't the Dengist period also some of the most corruption, some of the most corrupt aspects of Chinese development? While China did develop rapidly throughout that process and the fundamentals were set, like, didn't Xi Jinping literally seize control on the anti-corruption ticket, which he then... but he also did personally. Jiang Zemin era was probably the most corrupt. Like, I thought that Xi Jinping's big thing was that he was putting an end to cronyism, corruption of all sorts.
Mao died in 1976. Xi was back in Beijing studying communist philosophy. Even though the Chinese Communist Party had ruined...
This motherfucker was in a labor camp and was like, yo, this communism shit is fire.
Xi's family, he had joined it, just as the Cultural Revolution was winding down. But why?
Personally, he might begrudge Chairman Mao for doing all these terrible things to his family, but I think at this time he also recognized that in the system of the Chinese Communist Party, power is everything. Without power, you're nothing.
But in order to get that power, Xi did something unexpected. He left Beijing.
As his competitors were fiercely competing with each other in the 1980s and 1990s, he sort of got out of their way.
Yeah, again, as opposed to like all of these other kinds of political movements where power is nothing, famously. Power is important in politics, scary, because China. Power is important in politics in America, not scary, because it's America.
And went to the provinces.
He took positions in party leadership in rural, poor provinces all around China, where there were no other princelings to compete with. First in Hebei, a poor rural province outside of
They keep saying he's a fucking Nepo baby, dude.
Beijing, where he easily reached the top spot as party secretary. Then in Fujian, a heavily militarized region where top members of the army were stationed. He moved up the...
I think there's something very funny, especially about China, when talking about nepotism, in probably one of the most rugged, meritocratic forms of fucking, like, 1,000 years of governance. Like, it is not even, I mean, look, of course there are going to be distinctions. Of course there are going to be people with, like, an upper hand. But if you consider the Chinese governance historically, okay, to the United States of America, for example, where the class dynamic creates this environment where, of course, those who are of the ruling class, the bourgeois, are going to have a genuine upper hand in comparison to places like China, where standardized testing is literally at the foundation of like class mobility, or not even class mobility, but simply getting into power. It's kind of silly. Like, meritocracy isn't real. I've talked about this quite a bit, but there are aspects. Oh, my parents keep making noise. There are aspects of that get close to meritocracy, and I would say that like sports, professional sports, organized sports is a good example, right? Another good example would be definitely the way that the government works here in China.
The ranks to party secretary here too, before becoming the governor of the province a few years later. After making powerful friends in the military, Xi went here, where he once again assumed the office of party secretary and grew his support on the civilian side. This strategy of moving around didn't just give Xi a leg up in areas where competition was slim, it also gave him credibility as a humble, hardworking party leader. And he cultivated a growing group of supporters who would come back into play years down the line. He was hot. It was his last stop and his shortest one that ultimately got him back to Beijing. A brief stint in the top party spot in Shanghai in 2007, where he rehabilitated the city's image following a high-level corruption scandal. Xi developed a reputation here as a prudent leader who...
Dude, I can't believe he fucking shamelessly went to underdeveloped parts of the country and demonstrated good, strong municipal civil governance. I hate that. He did that, but in an evil way. You know what I mean? Like, he did that, but also in a way where, like, it was evil. Like, he was maliciously doing that.
Towed the party line. Just 7 months later, he finally returned to Beijing, having been promoted to the all-powerful Politburo Standing Committee.
Basically, the people who were deciding on top leadership at the time, they wanted a princeling, but they didn't want a princeling who was too ambitious or too strong. So Xi Jinping, he was seen as less ambitious because he was willing to go to the countryside and work in lower level positions.
When Xi emerged at the 2007 National Congress and leadership unveiling, he was one of the 9 most powerful men in the country. It was at this moment that his strategic climb, over 17 long years in the countryside, paid off, big time. When the General Secretary stepped down in 2012, Xi emerged at the top spot in the party as China's leader.
Why are they saying this is a bad thing? Like when Bill Clinton is the fucking governor of Arkansas, and like they consider that to be a good. They consider that to be a good thing for the Democratic Party. Okay, that's perfectly fucking valid. But when you got internal party structure looking for someone who actually rose through the ranks and got his fucking money up and not his funny up in rural parts, in lesser developed parts of the fucking country, that doesn't signal that the party is actually interested in development of rural parts. Also, this is why I get why, bro, the video never said that this was bad. They said it happened. The video never said it was bad. What do you mean? They literally said he went to a fucking lesser developed part specifically so he could rise through the ranks faster in a malicious way. Also, anyway, Israel can do no wrong, but only China only does wrong. Everybody knows that. No, there are shitty aspects of Chinese governance. There are shitty aspects of every fucking government. Okay. The problem is, from their own perspective, it's just like, yeah, he was good, but also he was like secretly bad, actually. Like, here's some ominous music. Here are the things that he did that in other circumstances, in America, for example, you would consider to be good. You know? But it's actually bad.
Now, the elite son of a former revolutionary turned exiled peasant turned party darling was poised to seize control of everything. Like Mao, Xi Jinping believes that rallying around a single figure is crucial to the party's survival, rather than the collective leadership Deng's reforms had normalized. So pretty much as soon as Xi Jinping came to power, he started getting rid of people.
The news 4 top officials removed for taking bribes was announced on state TV.
Xi Jinping has just sacked his foreign minister, just sacked his defense minister. He sacked a whole lot of other people at the top of the military establishment.
The former security czar has not been seen in public for more than a year. The investigation against Xu allows the Chinese president to remove those opposed to his reforms.
He launched a major anti-corruption campaign as soon as he took power in late 2012, early 13, which led to the arrest of hundreds of senior level officials, as well as military officers.
These purges targeted Xi's rivals in the party, whose vacant positions he filled with his own supporters.
After this massive purge...
Well, that's not true. It's literally not about him. They keep saying Xi Jinping thought is this way to deify him, but that's a lie. Xi Jinping thought consists of 14 policy, ensuring Communist Party of China leadership over all forms of work in China. The Communist Party of China should take a people-centric approach with the public interest, the continuation of comprehensive deepening of reforms. By the way, he's literally fucking, I mean, that was the drain the swamp shit, ironically. Oh, fuck, I'm hitting page down again. But again, it's like framed as a bad thing.
Xi Jinping was in very tight control over both the party and also the Chinese military, thereby making him the most powerful leader of the Chinese Communist Party since the death of Mao.
That pattern continued in the second term, where he unveiled 5 new faces of the Politburo Standing Committee, 3 of them with close personal ties to Xi. In 2021, Xi pulled off one of his...
This is yet another one of those situations where, like, half of the anti-China propaganda that is cut in America, unironically, if you didn't have, like, ominous music behind it, would be considered like a promotional material. Like, whenever they're like, dude, they're fucking... Did you guys know that in China, they executed the fucking corrupt politicians that were allowing spoiled baby formula to be sold? And then you look at that and you're like, well, first of all, I'm obviously not in favor of capital punishment, but you're like, well, what do you mean? Are you saying that this is somehow bad? That like what the fuck's going on? What do you want me to be on the side of the dude who was fucking selling baby formula knowingly that it was like killing children, like killing babies? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, what am I supposed to take? What's my takeaway from this? They could actually bring up bad things too, but that would hit the same as discrediting it as entirely. Yeah, half of this literally is like the head of state is the commander-in-chief of the military. Spooky. Did you guys know? This is what Republicans do as well, and I've talked about this before. What do you mean? You want to tell me that depending on where and when I was born, the government is going to assign me a number that dictates that will forever be the number that they assign me, that means, you know, that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to pay my taxes on the basis of said number. The government's going to come after me with guns if I don't pay money to it. Doesn't sound good to me, brother. I hate that. Seems like socialism. It's like, nah, that's just Social Security, dude. Ah, you said it. Social's in the name. That's your Social Security number. 1984, brother. Like, wow, I can't believe the leadership of the Chinese government was also the commander-in-chief. It was fucked up. I don't understand. Getting rid of officials that were actually taking bribes is bad, actually. Yeah, literally. I don't get it. If anything, you could talk about like how the magnifying glass on corruption wasn't necessarily on the virtue of corruption alone, but instead on people that were not loyal, like party loyalists, okay? Yeah, sure, there were some party loyalists that got, dookied on as well, but like Chinese prosperity as an initiative unironically does suspiciously target those who are naysayers. I don't know why. I don't know how, but that's just how it always works, okay? But it's like odd to look at it and be like, yeah, it's really fucked up. Really fucked up that they were taking out all the fucking corruption.
His most dramatic acts yet to enforce his influence over the Chinese Communist Party. He introduced a third historic resolution that unified the party's ideology around one clear line of thinking: Xi Jinping thought. Xi's personal political ideology would now be the core in the party's thinking, political stance, and action. Basically, Xi Jinping's ideas could no longer be challenged. And they weren't for many years. During Xi's first 10 years in power, the size of China's economy more than doubled. So did average individual income. So did military spending. Under his leadership, China's presence on the world stage has grown too, positioning the rising superpower to take on the role of an aggressor externally, reasserting claims over parts of the South China Sea, intimidating Taiwan and Tibet, and stripping democratic process in Hong Kong. Inside its own borders, strict internet censorship and surveillance are widespread. And oppression of Uyghurs, a mostly minority Muslim ethnic group, is marked by human rights abuses. But it wasn't until COVID that Xi saw the first real challenge.
I do think it's pretty funny that, like, Americans are so... We so don't give a shit about Muslims that, like, once it was no longer, like, a good political cudgel to use against China, they don't even fucking talk about the Uyghur thing. Well, they literally are just like, yeah, there was marked by human rights abuses. Moving on. Like, you can make a fucking 20-minute video just on the Uyghur stuff alone. You know what I mean? But, like, they don't give a fuck at the end of the day. They just legitimately don't care. Also, the AP kind of retracted a bunch of shit. Yeah, I mean, I know, but it's just... I always thought it was so wild. Like, I mean, I do agree. I do agree, especially as a Turkish person. I think that what China did, the idea that it was like simply just separatist movements or extremism amongst the population wasn't used simply as an example as to why mass re-education and mass surveillance was implemented and totally seen as like justifiable. It was silly. It wasn't like, that's not how you deal with separatist movements. You don't put a fucking dragnet on an entire population. And yes, America doing similar things. America doing similar things is not exactly a good thing in this situation. It doesn't mean anything. You can't fucking be like, well, America does it too. I don't give a fuck. Yeah, when America does it, it's bad too. Yes, I know. I know all the fucking knife attacks. Before every China dick rider turns around and literally fucking comes in this chat and sounds like a bunch of gung-ho Amerifats defending America, like, you know, I know the basics. I know the details. It's always funny, very funny, when like people who fucking despise Western chauvinism will repeat like jingoistic, super patriotic sentiment on collective punishment that is totally unacceptable. Like, completely unacceptable. Mass surveillance, collective punishment? No, not allowed. That's ridiculous. The irony is Xi Jinping also did the same fucking thing. I forget where I read it. I can't find it. But Xi Jinping once famously also said, "We learned it from you, Dad," basically. I'm paraphrasing. When talking about how they were dealing with Uyghur separatism. Like, literally, that no, not Reddit, man. I said read it. I don't remember which book I read it in, but I remember reading about how Xi Jinping, and this was years ago, when talking about the dealings with Uyghur separatists, he simply pointed the finger of blame to America after post 9/11 and said, well, they didn't even point the finger of blame, but said it would be awfully hypocritical for America to tell us how to deal with Muslim extremism. I think he might have literally been talking about Trump even. No, I don't think so. I think he just straight up said, treat it like the war on terror after 9/11 is what I remember. Yeah, he said something along the lines of the way we are dealing with Uyghur separatism in our country, inside of our borders, is similar to America's war on terror internally after 9/11. Which, by the way, is not allowed. It's not good. That's a fucking horrible policy.
To his authority.
Anger in China is growing.
Video showing protesters in Xinjiang fed up with China's zero COVID rules. The boldest public challenge yet for leader Xi Jinping.
With these protests all around the country and the party's reputation in peril, Xi reversed the failed policy, but is now faced with a shaky economy and cracks in his unchecked authority. It was just weeks before the widespread protests.
Bro. One of the funniest things that happened in contemporary Chinese politics was America constantly cutting videos about how fucking insanely strict China's COVID-0 policies were, which I agree. They were insanely strict. Okay? The uncertainty of how long people would be held in detention made matters even worse. So then they started protesting. Okay? They started protesting against it because they were like, this is fucking unacceptable. This is unacceptable. Right? Which is understandable. And America covered the protests. They said China is so restrictive. And then Xi Jinping was forced to respond to said protests, and he opened up the country, slowly but surely. Then Chinese COVID spiked in certain areas, and then America turned around and made fun of them for it. They literally fucking took the Chinese chuds who were like, come on, man, let us fuck COVID. I'm sick and tired of this shit. Promoted them. Then Xi Jinping was like, okay, fuck it, YOLO, no more COVID-0. They started getting COVID, and then BBC's like, lol, look at how many people are dying of COVID in China. What a bunch of fucking idiots. It's like, what are we doing? It's like my haters will be like, Hasan, what you said here was wrong. And I'll be like, you probably misunderstood. Let me go back to it. We watch the video. I'll be like, okay, you know what? I was wrong. Then they go, ha! You were wrong. Imagine admitting you were wrong. Ah, you're backtracking. I'm like, okay, well, there's new information. Now I know I'm wrong. It's like, doesn't matter. It's so crazy. I'm just like Xi. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
At the 20th National Congress in 2022, that Xi walked out in the leading position a third time. He'd already locked in the presidency for another 5 years and unveiled a Politburo Standing Committee completely packed with those loyal to him, after removing the final senior members of the party that had ties to his predecessor. Now, there is no one left in party or military leadership whose ideology differs from Xi.
I don't think anyone can push him out at this point. I think he will be the most powerful leader.
Yeah, bro, I want strong Xi Jinping style leadership in America. I'll say it. I don't give a fuck. I want a bunch of rugged loyalists that are just desperately trying to fucking make high-speed rail work in this country, okay? I want a motherfucker that's going to fight for healthcare. I want a motherfucker with a bunch of loyalists in his goddamn cabinet. I don't want a fucking strong Republican Party. Okay? I don't want that. Why do you want that? I don't want that. You want fucking strong Republicans? You want some transphobic fucking assholes leading policy? No. Suck my dick, I say. I do not want a strong Republican Party. I do not have these fucking ridiculous notions of liberalism. Okay? Fuck that. No. I want Nancy Pelosi to crush the Republican Party with her fucking Pelosi's. Okay? I want her to fucking smack like a goddamn gavel. Not fucking sit there and be like, oh my God, we want a strong Republican Party. Fuck that. Yeah, I want socialized medicine. I want free education. I want American development. I want rural development in America akin to Chinese development over the course of the past fucking 3 decades. And I don't give a fuck who brings it, okay? I don't care if they do it in a way that's like, oh no, we didn't spare the reactionaries' feelings on this process. Oh no. Like, fuck that, dude. Get the fuck out of here. Absolutely get the fuck out of here. That's ridiculous. Huh. Wouldn't you trade a joke vote every 4 years of this? That's what I mean about representative democracy being a con. I mean, no, it's just like, that's never going to happen, ultimately. It's not. Also, I think this video would be far more interesting if they actually talked about how, like, Chinese elections work or how municipalities work. Like, there's an insane performance. There's an insane performance quota in the way that the Chinese government operates. It's very odd from the American perspective. What's the CCP take on trans people? Fuck, what was it? I forget. They're clamping down on social. They're becoming more socially conservative in certain ways and becoming more progressive in others. Okay. It's mixed. It's not as aggressive as you think it is. I remember being shocked personally because I thought it was also very aggressive. Like, I thought it was aggressively transphobic, which is, I guess, Orientalist, and it's my bad. I want to explore China so bad, but the government sucks as a Malaysian. I cannot get there. In the end, governments are never as progressive as the people because they're usually very old. Fuck. I think they're anti-gay, but marginally pro-trans. I mean, I know there's like a super famous. One of the most famous women in China is trans. But she's also kind of conservative too. Anyway. Yeah, she's yeah, the Chinese Oprah. Conservative trans, huh? No, like conservative as in like hyper patriotic, hyper nationalist. I mean, but every Chinese celebrity is obviously like that. The greatest thing that you get in China, other than high-speed rail, is the fact that at the top of the hour, you don't get a 3-minute ad break. And if you no longer want to see those ads at the top of the hour, if you do live in the United States of America, all you need to do is subscribe. You won't have the high-speed rail, but just like a Chinese watcher, you won't literally see the ads at the top of the hour. Here's the 3-minute ad break now. You can also get gifted a sub. They ain't watching this shit in China. I'm sure I got one person from China watching. I got people from everywhere around the world. Dude, I have literal Japanese fans. I have actual Japanese fans who don't even fucking speak English that much. Like, think about the time difference. Think about the time difference, like how bad the time difference is. Moldovan Mama Liga. That's not, you didn't write his name right. And the fact that there's like a massive gap in translation, or there's a language gap. And yet there's still Japanese people that watch me. It blows my mind when I hear about that shit. The one Indonesian guy in Tokyo. HasanAbi is a horrible anti-American Chinese simp versus ain't nobody watching you in China, bro. I mean,
in China, as long as he's alive and conscious.
Thanks so much for watching this episode of Atlas.